house. And there were times where I would, like, we'd be fooling around and I would grab Robin, you know, not on the air, but we'd be talking and I would throw her down on the couch and hop on and start humping her leg. But totally, as silly as it sounds, but it was totally platonic. It was me. I never said it out loud, but it was me fucking around with the fat girl. You know what I mean? There was nothing sexual about it. It was just me being goofy. And she'd giggle and be a whole thing. And Howard would be like, boy, you really love Robin, don't you? Man, you're really attracted to her. I couldn't say, no, she's the fat chick that I have no intention of ever fucking. But you can't say that. I would never say that, whether it hurt her feelings. I'm not saying it like I was invited. Don't get me wrong. But the point was there was nothing sexual about it. But he just didn't comprehend that. And he'd talk about how, I was so attracted to her and blah, blah, blah. And it was ridiculous. But I did love screwing with her because she would, you know, she could be so pompous and she was an idiot, you know. The one thing she did that really enamored me to her, and when I realized what we were all in for the whole ride, we had just gone to mornings, and I was a regular cast member. I probably told you this story already. And one day I came in and I said, you know, I was learning that everything's for the air. You know, not to say anything in the office because everything is fodder. You know, you got 5 hours to fill. And I said, Howard, I got to tell you, I had a really wild, graphic, realistic sex dream about Robin last night. I mean, it was so realistic. And I wasn't lying. I mean, I really had like I don't know if it was a wet dream. I was already 38 years old, but it was very, very real, you know? And so we all laughed and it was pretty wild. And, you know, that's where he got on the whole thing with Jackie so attracted. The point was I wasn't attracted to her. And the fact that happened, I thought was pretty funny. But what really endeared me to her was like a week later or 2 weeks later, she came on the air and said, Howard, I have an admission to make. Last night I had a really wild sex dream about Jackie. And I thought, how cool is it that she would admit that? You know, she knew it was great fodder and it was very, very funny. I'm sure they never replay that. Anything that's glamorizes Jackie doesn't get played. But that was, to me, that was like, wow, that's, you know, who else? That was like Gary admitting about his girlfriend making fun of him and stuff. You know, you just gave everything. You know, you just gave everything. And I thought that was pretty cool.
You guys subliminally were.
She got a little big for her britches, but that's all right. She needed big britches.
Well, and that's the weird. Howard just depends on her for some weird. It's very odd how much he talks about how much he needs her, because I think a lot of people think he doesn't need her, but it's very odd when you hear him talking.
You know who says that he doesn't need her? The same people that say, why did Costello have Bud Abbott hanging around? He didn't need him. If you ever saw Lou Costello without Bud Abbott, you couldn't get to the door quick enough. It's, you know, it's a very give-take relationship, you know, at least for what he's doing, you know. I mean, he could go on any show and do anything. And could he sit there and talk for 5 hours? I'm sure. But there's a whole different thing with tossing it back and forth. You know, they want to give me a show. I do a lot of podcasts. I talk to 1 million different people. You know, I did 3 already. You're my 3rd guy today. Because I love talking. I love telling the stories. And I love the whole thing and promoting stuff. But they want to give me a show. And I don't know if I do a show, I got to have somebody. I got to have somebody to talk to. Even just an engineer to say, blah, 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 blah. You know? You know what I mean? So you know what I mean? You got to toss the ball a little bit. You know, it's very interesting.
Well, it's good to see you can get that instant. Was this funny to somebody? And the fact that she laughs at everything, it makes it good.
Right. That is a little crazy, you know, because people say, oh, I can always tell Jackie when you wrote a joke because you laughed. I said, no, what I do is I laugh at everything that's funny. And I laugh depending on how funny it is. And sometimes if it's something Fred wrote or something Howard said on his own, and it's really funny, I will scream. And people assume that I wrote it. And I'm not, I'm not just laughing because I wrote it. I laugh when something's really funny. And so fortunately, a lot of things I wrote I thought were really funny, or I wouldn't have written them. But her, you could say, Bill Gates just got hit by a truck, and she goes, Robin, you got really big tits. Robin, I think I'm going to have diarrhea. It didn't matter what he says. It's the same laugh every time, which is pretty, it's weird. But, 40 years later, she's still, so I guess somebody likes it.
I don't know if she's still doing it. I haven't heard a lot of late, but I guess she's still doing it. Couple more minutes with you, Jackie. I appreciate it. I did talk to Tom Chiusano. I think you may have seen that, and I thought it was interesting how he felt really bad about this the history of 20 years ago.
I don't want to talk about leaving the show. It's been up and down and all around, and nobody admitted this, and then they admitted that, and people say to me, Jackie, when you talk about that, it's the same story that you told 20 years ago. I'm like, because that's what happened. I've never varied from the story of what happened, and I just could care less about it.
I thought it was interesting though that Tom was very. It hurt him more than I think I've ever heard him say.
It was a regrettable decision on his part. I liked Jackie and still, think kindly of Jackie. I have no idea how Jackie thinks of me. I haven't talked to him. I was the one handling that negotiation, and as I had in the past, and he had, we had tough negotiations prior to that. If I remember correctly, where he had walked for a little bit, and and Howard always wanted him back. But in this one in particular, I had made sure that, Howard and I had conversations about it. He knew exactly what I was doing. I had talked to my boss, who was Mel, and said, this is, and made sure that I had all the money in line, and, had approvals for the money that I was offering him and all those kinds of things. I put what was a very generous offer, what I believe was a very generous offer to Jackie on the table, guaranteed employment. I won't go into the specifics of it. But it was it should have been a life changer for him, given where he was and had been. And I actually remember some of my words in the meeting. I looked at him and said, Jackie, I should be the guy trying to, to downplay you, to not take this offer, because it's a lot. I'm putting a lot on the table, but Jackie had encouraged me when I came back from cancer to kind of go on, when we started going on the road trips to Vegas, to make sure that I came, and said, why wouldn't you take it? Why not come? And so I appreciated that, and I appreciated the sense that I had that Jackie's caring about me at that point, and I tried to express that to him in this final meeting that we had, and I even said, I'm trying to remember the guy's name from MASH who left. And I used him as an analogy. The old TV show MASH, one of the main characters, left the show. And I said, don't be that guy. Stevenson, I think, was his last name.
Yeah, it was Hawkeye and Jamie Farr, the only two people, like Radar, the two people.
Yeah, but it was the first colonel, who was the boss of the MASH unit. And I said, don't be that guy. This is a serious offer. It's a lot of money, and we'd like you to stay. Obviously, I wouldn't put this on the table if we don't want you to stay. And he decided at that point that it wasn't good enough for him. And everybody, as I said, Howard knew, and the other principals that needed to know knew. And when he tried to come back after rejecting the proposal, it was decided. It wasn't my decision. It wasn't my end of the day decision. But it was decided that, no, time to move on. And I've always felt bad about that. If somehow this is reaching you, Jackie, I hope you understand that. I really did. I really did want you to take that. I really did want you to be part of it. But it was decided, it was enough, because what was going to happen the next time we went around.
I might work.
I wish I'd been able. encourage him with found the right words to make that offer stick with him to where he would have taken it.
I think he was Mr. Business Guy, but
so the good news is, so you're saying he's still alive, which is great because I had no idea if he's still alive. Are you talking about recently?
Yeah, and I was curious if you guys would ever have do you have any hard feelings with Tom, or is that?
No. Could be, in all fairness to Tom, he had no say in any of it. It was all Howard and Buckwalter. Yeah, Tom, it was kill the messenger. When I told them I would take the job back and they said they would get back to me, I thought it was so rude and cruel after 18 years to not have the class to call up and say, we don't want you back, we're going to pass. But that was not Tom's decision. He couldn't have called me up and said, Jackie, we're not taking you back. That was not his decision to make. I don't know that, but I know that. I'm sure I could hear Mel or Howard or Don say, fuck him, let him hang out to dry. I never had a problem with Tom. When Howard signed his contract back then, it was in the middle of December. He said, well, you can make your deal with Tom. And Tom made the offer. I said, no, that's not what I want. And he said, and I knew he either had cancer or he was going to have cancer. And he was supposed, I said, listen, take your trip to Paris and we'll talk about it when you get back. Who knew if the guy was going to die in 2 days? He's a human being. I'm a human being. I always liked him. He, as much as I fucked with him, that was my job, But he was a good guy, and he still is a good guy. And if he's still alive and kicking, I'm glad to hear that. So
he is. He was.
Maybe, you know what? Now that I know that, maybe I'll search him down and tell him I said hello. Maybe buy a steak for him or something.
I said I'm gonna try to get you both together at some point on this thing.
No. You don't have. I don't want somebody to orchestrate it. I'll chase him down. You can send me his contact info if you got it, because I'm. For all I know, he's got the same email 30 years later. Who knows?
He's not at K-Rock anymore. I did want to ask you, I've never asked you about your days with Eddie Murphy and the back days. When did you first see him, and when did you know right away? Because it was you guys crossed paths. Tell me about just those days back in the early, I guess, late 70s, early 80s.
It's funny because I'm back in touch with Clint. There's a really, really great story about Eddie and Clint in the car with me and Dave Hawthorne. And it was a story when Howard always used to say, well, if you guys had driven Eddie an extra 100 yards, you'd all be in the movies. And his best friend Clint was in the car. And Clint, they just redid Coming to America. And Clint is one of the guys in the barber shop.
Right. He was in
the guys are Eddie, and one of them's Arsenio, and the other one's Clint, And I've been talking recently to the old guys. I was talking to Rob Bartlett and Minervini, some of the guys that, were at Dixon's White House Inn when we all hung there. And Eddie was like 16 or 17 years old, when I met him, when we all met him. And it was so funny because he was a nice guy, but he was so, and I don't even know if the word is cocky. He was so sure of himself. He was like, I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. We're like, Eddie, shut up. I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. And this famous story is like I was making my second comedy album at the East Side. And he said, Jack, those microphones, you making another album? And I said, yeah. He said, Jack, I want to have an album. I said, I'd love to help you, Eddie, but I'm too busy. Could you imagine if I had helped him with his first album? I'd be living in Malibu, But I
would call you delirious, actually, if you catch them.
I didn't find them all that funny. In the beginning, just about everything he did was, he basically just did Richard Pryor and Richard Pryor material, and then he just replaced Richard Pryor with Eddie material, which is even better. But I didn't think it was, I have audio tape of everybody from back then except him. I never turned on the tape recorder. I was not a fan of somebody. I didn't think somebody was funny just because they were black. I just didn't. And it was that simple. And he was very, it wasn't racist at all. I just didn't find it funny. But he was a nice enough guy. And, we went on to, I'll send you the stories like when we're in the cars together. We'd all go out to do gigs, and he was great. And they needed a black guy for Saturday Night Live, and boom, he went to the moon. You know, his first manager, Richie Tinkin, owned the comic strip in Manhattan, and then the one in Fort Lauderdale too. And Richie just passed away 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he was, you know, one of the great guys, one of the great club owners, and you know, and him and another owner of the comic strip took on Eddie as a client, and you know, a year later they're driving around in white Rolls Royces and everything. You know, they were bums from the Bronx, and you know, boom, you know, but great characters. But Murphy was fine, and I ran into him here or there. I ran into him years later when we had just started the Channel 9 show, and for some reason, maybe we were broadcast, I forget, but I was at the China Club, and Eddie was there. And so he said, "Hey, Jack, Eddie Murphy's over there." So I went over and said hello to him. He said, "Jack, that Channel 9 show you guys do, that is the funniest thing on television. And no, I'm not going to do the show." I'll never forget. No, I'm not going to do the show. He was